But if you feel the speed is a little bit fast, then let me know. Then I will slow down somehow, or I will erase some unnecessary parts from the slides. Okay, so in this slide, I want to consider some strings a little bit more. Okay. I want to manipulate some strings. Okay, so you already considered several examples of input functions, and in Python, the input function acts as a pure text collector. Actually, regardless of what the user types into the terminal, Python always packages and returns that data as a character string. So even though the value from the user is integer valued or float valued, Python returns that value as a character string. So in some situation, as shown in our assignment, if you expect certain number, some integer valued or float valued, to perform some mathematical operations, but Python leave it as a character string. Okay, it always treats it as a text data. So that might cause some logical error, unless you are careful to slightly modify that input function. Okay, so to bridge this gap between what you wanted, okay, and what the Python returns, we must use some data conversion, like int function or float function, to manually transform the text representation of a number into an accurate numeric data type. So, suppose that I have the following input function. So input, enter a number. So when, say, user types, say 5, for example, then user data receive that 5, but 5 will be saved as a character string. So when you print the type of the variable, then Python will say, okay, it is the character string. Okay. For human beings, it is just a number 5, but Python recognizes it as a text string. So when you perform any arithmetic operation like the variable plus numeric value 10, then Python will complain. Okay? Because the plus sign between character string and numeric integer is not defined in Python. So it depending on the programming languages, some languages may behave slightly different than this one. But anyway, this is what happens with Python. Okay. So the correct way is this. So if you are certain, okay, if you are certain that, okay, the information from the user at this command, at this point, is an integer value. Okay, so if you are certain, then you can convert that user input into an integer value by explicitly calling this int function. Okay. Of course, you can combine these two and say the age input is the obtained from the input function, and then you can call an int function on top of that. Then similarly to the composition of two functions, once the inner function input returns the value 5, that value will be handled by this outer function, int function. So int function will convert that character string of 5 into a numeric integer. So you can combine these two like this. Okay, so in that case, I do not need this underscore and input, and then I can directly define age with int and input of certain prompt, right? So that can be written. So if I do that, if I use the code in the my original slide, or I can combine these two into a single statement, or in either situation, if I call type age, then age will be of type integer. Okay. So since this number is an integer, I can perform any operation, arithmetic operation like this, age minus 65 minus age, okay, can be computed without any problem, and the result can be printed on the screen. Okay. One weakness of this current code is the following. While this int function is perfect for full number, many real-world data points such as prices, temperatures, or weights require decimal precision. So in that case, for those types of variables, I need to convert the character string into appropriate float number. And for that purpose, we can use a float function. So float function will convert if the user types 5, not, okay? And if you call this float function, then that 5 will be changed from character 5 to 5.0, a float number. If the user types, say, 10.0, so as I said, this float conversion is more flexible than int function. So if the user enters 10, this float function will convert it to 10.0, numeric 10.0. Okay. In Python, when you use int function, and if the user types 10.5, Python does not convert this 10.5 to 10 or 11. In case of this int function in Python, it will give you an error message. Okay? This behavior is slightly different from other languages. In some languages, if you call int function with the value 10.5, it may convert that 10.5 to certain integer value. Of course, some language convert the value 10.5 to 10. Some programming language convert it to 11. Okay, it depends on the language. But in Python, the program crashes. So the behavior is different. So please be careful. Anyway, in this example, if I have this input with certain prompt, and here the price is asked. So you suppose that user types, say, 19.95. And for the next question, for the tax rate, suppose that user types, say, 0.08. In that case, the price will be the float version of price string. Tax rate will be float version of text string. So you must convert these two text strings into float numbers before you use them. Okay, unless you just print the value of the character string. If you perform any mathematical calculation, you need to convert them to numeric values. And then you need to estimate the amount of tax, which will be price times tax rate. That will give you the amount of the tax. And then the total price of the item will be the value of the price plus the tax amount. So once you estimate these, you can print these values. Okay. So in this case, in this example, I'm introducing certain variables which are expected to be the float numbers. And for that purpose, I need to convert the variable, okay, price string and tax string into numeric values by calling the float function. And as I said in the previous case, I can define price directly by combining a float function with input function. So if you provide the prompt here for the input, then user will type something like 1995, and that will be saved into the string by this inner function. But this outer float function will convert that text string into a float number. By doing this, I don't have to introduce this variable price string. Okay. Some people prefer writing this statement in two lines, right? Some people might prefer writing those in single line. It depends, okay, on your preference. So you can write this sentence in one line or two lines, but if you write them in two lines, probably I need to introduce one more variable. So if you don't want to introduce a new variable, then you can combine this into one. Then if you write down in two lines, it's easier to read, but I need to introduce another variable. If I write down in a single line, I don't have to create a new name for a variable, but it's a little bit more difficult than the expressions in two lines. So it's a matter of choice, preference. And similarly for tax rate. Okay, but sometimes that code might have some problem, okay? Because programmers often write code assuming users will follow the instructions perfectly, but that's not the case in many situations, okay? When you use the functions like int or float, the values given to this int or float must be integer values or float values, respectively. Otherwise, int or float will complain with some error message. Okay? So int function can handle this integer value 20. And float function can handle a literal, character string of 10.5 can be handled by a float function. But in case of int function, it can handle this character string of 20, but it cannot handle the expression like this. Float function is the same. It cannot handle, say, 20.5. Okay? And if such a value is given, Python will complain with some error message. So here is some example. If I have this input function as before, So I create the user input. Suppose that user types this is 20, not 20. Well, please enter your age. Even though the prompt is in digits, if the user does not follow that instruction and then types 20, then this user input will have this value 20. Okay, so the user input now has character string of 20. So the line 2, this line is fine. Okay? The problem occurs when you call this int function with that character string of 20. So at this point, when this 20 is given as a value for int function, at that point, Python will complain with these error messages. Okay? So, up to this, the code is fine. Code works, even when the user types 20. Okay? But at this point, okay, Python will complain because int received a character string which cannot be converted to a numeric integer. Okay? Then how can I fix this? How can you fix this? This kind of question, this kind of situation happens all the time. Then how can I fix this? So the Python provides several functions, some methods to help this. So before attempting to convert character string into a number, integer or float, okay? We can first check whether the character string which you received from the user is actually representing some numeric integer or numeric float. Okay? You need to check this before you call the functions. And then you can call the function int or float only when the information given is actually numeric integer or numeric float number. Okay? We can use some functions like this. There is a function, okay, in Python. These are functions you can use only for character strings, and the functions used for certain restricted, limited variables will be called methods. So at this point, when you see a method, you can interpret it as a function. Okay, that's some kind of function, special type of a function. So there are some functions like this. Is digit, is alpha numeric, and is space. As the name says, is digit function checks if the character string contains only numeric digits. Okay, it checks whether that character string consists of some numeric values, numeric digits only. Is alpha checks if the character string contains only alphabets. Okay? Is alpha numeric? That checks if the character string contains only letters or numbers. Is space? Checks if the character string contains only white spaces. When I say white spaces, it means a space or tab key or new line. Space is a space you just make using a space bar, and tab key is represented by \t, and new line character is \n. So if you have some one of these, okay, in your character string, then each space will return true. So these four functions will return true or false depending on the value received. So is this function will return true when the character string contains only digits. If the character string contains, say, some alphabet, then it will return false. Is alpha will return true only when your character string consists of alphabets. Otherwise, it will return false. Is alpha numeric will check whether the character string consists of only alphabets and numerical digits. Otherwise, it will return false. Is a space function will return true only when the string contains only spaces. If it contains something else, say numeric digit or alphabets, that function will return false. And so when the character string is, say, 42, is a digit method or is a digit function will return true. But is the alpha function will return false because it consists of numeric digits. Is alpha numeric, that function will also return true. And is a space will return false. When high is given, is a digit function will return false. Is alpha will also return false because of this special symbol, special character. By the same reason, the function will return false under is alpha numeric function. Is a space function, that will also return false because it does not consist of spaces or tab key. Anyway, you can use one of these functions, and please note that each function starts with this dot. And if you want to use those functions, you can call that function after the name of the variable followed by dot and the name of the function. So given data 1, data 2, data 3, three variables. Data 1 is Python 3, data 2 is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and data 3 just consists of spaces. For data 1, if I call is alpha numeric, that will print true because it consists of alphabets and numeric digit 3. If I call just alpha is alpha, it will return false because number 3 is included in data 1. In case of data 2, that consists of 5 digits. So when I call is a digit function, it will return true. In case of data 3, if I call is a space function, it will true again because it consists of only spaces. Okay, so given some character string, and character string occurs quite often in Python because whenever you receive some information from the user by the input function, the value will be stored by a character string. Okay, so we encounter many examples of character strings, and that's why we have many functions for those character string type variables. So going back to the original problem, if I have a code to ask the age of the person, and if the person types not number 2 and 0, but say 20 in English, then the previous code gave an error message. But if I combine one of those functions, say, for example, if I use, say, is a digit function, probably I can avoid that error message. Okay? And is a digit function returns false for any strings, which also prevents crashes when a user simply types enter key. Okay, so here is the code. So if the user receives some information from the user for that question, so the value is stored under this user input variable. Okay, so if the user types only digits, say some numbers, okay, say number 2 and 0. In that case, this condition will be true statement. So if that condition is true, then that means user types some numeric digits like 2, 0. In that case, I can convert that variable into int function using int function, and this int function will not cause any error message. So once you get this age, you can manipulate any arithmetic operation. But if the user types, say, 20, then you get the condition will become false. Then there are several ways, okay? You can ask the user the question one more time until when the user types in just the digits. Or you can just finish this program, okay, by just giving some error messages. Okay? So if the user types certain numeric values like this, then some output can be obtained for this. But if the user types some information like 20, then instead of facing some error message, the program may give some instruction. Or actually, preferably, you may ask the question again until the user types in the correct value in correct format. In that case, probably I need to combine this structure with a while loop. Right? I can check certain condition, and until that condition becomes false, I can keep asking the same question. So anyway, at this point, I can handle that situation by using isODIGIT function. Any questions? Okay, then let's take a break for 10 minutes, and in the meantime, please send a message to the TA so that she can check the attendance. Okay? So if you send a message between 2:19 up to 2:39, it will be marked as, properly. But if your message is late, then it will be marked as tardy. Okay, now today we will consider many other functions which can be applied to the character strings. Okay, and one function we first consider will be start with function. As the name says, it checks whether, this one checks whether a character string sequence begins with a specific pattern of characters. Okay, and when this one checks, so when this Python checks whether character string starts with certain specific characters, the case matters as we studied. So this case is sensitive. So if your code searches for py with uppercase p, then that will be different from lowercase py. Okay, and this is very useful for scanning files, or especially the messages from the Python interpreter to instantly pull out lines that start with some error messages. So if if you have a very long program, then your Python interpreter will give you a long output, okay? And in that case, if any error occurs, then Python will print out certain line which starts with error colon something, some type of error. So given this character string, if you read a certain file, and this everything will be interpreted as character string, and if the line starts with this error, then you can stop there and you can do something, right? So if I have some message from the program, and if that is saved and under the log message variable, and then if this log message starts with error, then you need to do something, right? Say you can print, okay, we have a failure and we need to do something. Otherwise, you can skip that line and then we can proceed, right? So in that case, so if you need to check whether certain line start with specific expression, then in order to check this, you can use start with function. In a similar way, sometimes I can check whether this message or character string ends with a specific character, and that can be performed by ends with function. So when I read, for example, the name of the file you sent, and if the name of the file, okay, does not end with .py, then probably you gave me the wrong type of file, right? So this ends with method will determine if a character string terminates with predefined character set. Okay. And yeah, so this is actually what I can do with the name of the files which you sent me. And you can pass multiple character sets, okay, wrapped inside this parenthesis, and Python will automatically return true if the string matches any of these choices. Okay, I can provide multiple characters. Okay, and if the character string ends with one of these, then this function will return true. And at this point, when you wrap these multiple values with a parenthesis, that group of items will be called a tuple. And let me explain what a tuple is, okay, regarding this tuple later, okay. Today, you can just forget about this terminology, and then just remember that you can wrap those multiple characters with parentheses, not curly braces or square bracket, but parentheses. So here is an example. So suppose that I have a file name with this information. So if I call ends with function with one possible character set, then since file name ends with this .py, this condition will become true statement. So this print line will be executed. So this line will be printed on your screen. In the next example, I wrap 3 different characters with the parentheses. Okay? So at this point, you don't have to know the meaning of tuple. Okay? I'm just wrapping, okay, multiple characters with the parentheses. And that is called valid documents. And then if I call ends with this valid document, then it checks whether this file, whether this variable user upload ends with one of these three character sets. So if the file name, the file extension is either .pdf or .docx or .txt, if the extension is one of these three, the first print line will be executed. Otherwise, if the file extension is different from these three, then the second print will be executed. Since in this example, user upload variable has some character string which ends with .pdf, that is one of the choices in the valid documents. So the first line, the upload status document accepted for processing, is printed on your screen. Okay. And then we have a count function. So count function, as the name says, okay, it is very intuitive. The count function will scan a character string, okay, to calculate exactly how many times a specific substring appears. Okay? And when this is counted, okay, you count, okay, you consider, you apply non-overlapping rule, meaning Python counts matches from the left to the right, but it only tracks non-overlapping occurrences. Once a character is used in a match, that character is discarded. Okay, it's not considered anymore. So once a character is used in a match, it cannot be reused for the next count. And it is also case sensitive. So meaning the lowercase apple with uppercase A apple will be different. And for this non-overlapping rule, let me show you some example. So suppose that I have some sequence from my DNA sequence contains this. Okay? And if I count, say, appearance of CAC, okay, then it will check, okay? So from this first letter, I'm looking for CAC, so I have CAC here. And I have one more CAC here. So when this number is printed, 2 will be shown on the screen. Now, when you look at the second example, I have this string ABABA, okay? And then if I consider the frequency of ABA, you may say, okay, ABA is found here, and then I can see another ABA here. But in that case, A in the middle is used 2 times as a part of the first character string, and then A in the first letter of the second character string, right? So Python does not allow that kind of, reuse. So in this ABA character string, when ABA is first considered, then first 3 letters will be discarded. Okay, they are not considered anymore. And in the remaining letters, which is BA, you need to count the occurrences of ABA. And in these remaining letters, we cannot find the occurrence of ABA. So in this character string of 5 letters, ABA appears only once. Okay? And as I said on the first day, okay, please do not talk with your classmates during the class. If you need to talk, please go outside the classroom, or please respect somebody else, some other students, okay? We have many students, okay? Even though you want to talk, please wait, okay? And there is another function called replace. In this case, you are searching for a certain specific substring of the character string, and then you want to replace that string with the new expression. So in case of the replace function, you need to provide 2 character strings. One which is an old expression, and the second expression will be a new one. So that means you want to replace this old expression with a new expression, given this character string. If you find any old expression, that will be converted to the new expression. Okay. And by default, it swaps all occurrences found throughout the entire sequence. And if the new string is an empty string, then that means whenever you find an old expression, that will be replaced by an empty string. Okay? That means it will be erased. So here is some example. Suppose that I have this sentence, I love Java, Java is robust, okay? And the new sentence will be, sentence replace Java with Python. Then whenever I see Java in this character string, that will be replaced by Python. So the occurrences of Java will be replaced by Python. So if you print, this will be shown. Okay. And example 2, I have price in the amount of $1,250. Now in this character string, if I call replace with this one, this dollar sign will be replaced by an empty string. Okay, so that means I will remove this dollar sign from the character string. Okay, so that's what this line is generating. So that will give this new character string. So that portion will generate, okay, instead, without this dollar sign, 1.250.00 will be created by this portion. This red portion will create this one. Given that character string, the second replace function will replace this comma with an empty string. Then that means you will, so if I perform this additional replace function, then that will eliminate this comma from the character string. So that will generate 125.0.00. Okay? So that's what will be shown, okay, or created from the screen. Questions? And this one I already explained previously. So there are functions called lower and upper functions. Okay? And as I said, the Python is case sensitive, so lowercase expressions will be different from uppercase expressions. And in case of lower function, this method will convert every alphabetic character to lower cases. In case of digits or special characters, they are not changed. They are not altered. But if you have any alphabets in upper cases, they will be converted to alphabets in lower cases. In case of upper function, it will change every alphabet into uppercase, and it does not consider some other characters like digits or special characters. They are not handled. Okay. So here are some examples. So if I have this text string, if I call upper function, then every letter in data science will be converted to upper cases. But the spaces or this 101, they are not changed because there is no upper or lower case in case of digits or spaces. In a similar way, if I call lower function, every letter, every alphabet will be converted to lower cases. And if the user response is this, only in E in uppercase, when I convert it to lowercase, then at that point, the cleaned response will have YES in lower cases. So if I compare that value with YES and that condition will be true, so the user agreed to proceed will be printed. Okay? Now, for your second assignment, you don't have to check this kind of error checking. Okay? In case of character string, if the program expects some character strings, my TA will type correct information. So for the names of the items, she will type some appropriate names for these names, okay? Names of the items. In case of the value corresponding to certain float number, she will type appropriate float numbers as well. Okay? So you don't have to consider the error checking for this second assignment as well. You can just consider the main part. Probably in the third and fourth homework assignments, right after the midterm, I will give some more assignments. For that assignment, I may ask you to handle that kind of errors. So I will tell you in case of the third and fourth assignments. Okay? We will consider some more advanced topic after the midterm. Now there are some functions called capitalize and title. Okay. In case of capitalize, the very first character of the entire string, okay, will be changed to upper cases. And all the other letters will remain lower cases. In case of title, first character of every individual word will be changed to upper cases. All the others will be converted to lower cases. Okay? So here is an example. If I have this sentence, if I capitalize that sentence, only the first letter of the entire sentence will be written in uppercase. All the others will be written in lower cases. In case of a title, the first character of each word will be written in upper cases and all the others will be in lower cases. Okay, you can consider the differences between upper, lower, capitalized, or title functions, right? So here are some summary of these functions. So suppose that I have a Korea University in lower cases and one space between Korea and university. If I call lower function, since it is already written in lower cases, nothing is changed. But if I call upper function, every letter in this expression will be converted to upper cases. If I call capitalized, only the first letter will be written in the uppercase. If I call title, this K and U will be written in upper cases and all the others are in lower cases. In case of artificial intelligence, and here in the original expression, the upper cases and lower cases are somewhat mixed. If I call lower function, all the letters will be written in lower cases. And if I call upper function, every letter is expressed in uppercase. If I call capitalized, only A and I will be written in upper cases and all the others are in lower cases. Sorry. Only A in this expression will be written in uppercase and all the others are in lower cases. If I call title, A and I are written in upper cases and all the others are in lower cases. Here I have, so 3 days left is given. Then when I call lower function, you get this. If you call upper function, you get this. If I call capitalized, the first letter of the sentence is 3, not D. So this is what is given from the capitalized function. If I call title, then D and L will be changes to upper cases. Okay. Then what if I want 3 days left? What if I want this output? Okay, D in uppercase, but L in lowercase. So, to answer this, okay, I need to consider some more functions. Okay, so far, we just considered lower, upper, capitalized, and title, which may be common, okay, in some countries, okay. And depending on the data, okay, we might need the kind of methods to convert the given expression into somewhat formal format. Now, as we observed in some previous slide, given 2 integers or given 2 floats, the plus sign will consider the addition of those 2 numbers. But when you use the plus sign between 2 character strings, then this plus sign behaves for the concatenation, meaning you just combine those 2 character strings. Okay? And when you concatenate character strings, those space is added. You just append them. Okay? So if you want some space between 2 character strings when they are concatenated, you need to put, say, character string 1 plus, you put one space plus you put another character string. So if you do that, then possibly you can append them with some space in between. Now, if you add character string with character string 1, okay, or character string 1 more time, then that means character string 1 will be concatenated 3 times. And in Python, the addition of 3 values, then regardless of the type of the value, if you add 3 times, then that is equivalent to multiplying 3 to the variable. So this expression will be the same as string 1 times 3. So if I define string 2 by the sum of string 1 plus string 2, string 1 plus string 1, that can be shortened to string 2 defined by string 1 times 3. So that is the meaning of multiplication in the character strings in Python. So that number, that expression is allowed, okay? So in Python, string 1 plus 1 as string 2 will cause an error message because the addition between 2 different types, character string and integer, is not defined. But you can multiply an integer to a character string, and that means you are concatenating that character string, that integer number of times. Okay, so this is fine. This is a correct expression. Okay. But as I said, you cannot add an integer or float number to character string in Python, and in that case, it will introduce this type error message. But you can still multiply an integer. You cannot multiply a float number to a character string, but you can multiply an integer value to a character string, and that means you are concatenating that character string this number of times. So, as an example, if the first word is hello and second word is word, then when you add them, this addition will actually concatenate these character strings. And when you multiply character string with an integer, that is the same as this high character string plus one more high plus one more high. So these 9 characters are all concatenated. Okay? So that's what you do, okay? I mean, what you obtained from this code. So please be careful. Okay. If you have actual character string like this, okay? If you have actual character string like this, then the chance of error will be very slim, okay? But if this is replaced by some name of the variable, okay, then it is very difficult to find an error. Let me show you some example later. Okay. Okay, so suppose that I have a variable, lecture number 7, and here is the title line. So if I have this note, and then if I want to print lecture number 7, okay, then we have a problem because, as I said, this addition does not work, okay, when character string and integer are added. So you get an error message because Python does not know how to handle this addition. So you need, before you add these two, you need to change the type of one of the variables so that these two variables have the same type. Since the first variable note cannot be converted to integer value, so if you want to add them, then you need to convert this number with a string function. When you wrap this variable with a string function, then this numeric value 7 will be converted to a character string 7, and then you can concatenate them. Okay. So if I had string of lecture number, then title line will have note, space, and 7 in that case. Now, there is one function named strip. So, as the name says, it will eliminate. Then, what do we eliminate? It will eliminate all the white spaces in this string. Okay? So, when you have a strip function, then that will eliminate white spaces in the beginning and in the end of the character string. So it will eliminate all white spaces from both ends of the string. Okay? Only white spaces in the beginning and in the end of the character string. It does not touch any white spaces in the middle. Okay? So that's one thing you need to be careful, okay? So it leaves any internal white spaces between words, okay? It does not touch this. Okay? It does not touch any white spaces in the middle of the expression. It only eliminates white spaces in the beginning and at the end. Okay, that's first one thing you need to be careful. Second, the string methods never alter the original variable. Instead, this strip creates and returns a new character string. Okay, let me explain with the example. So, in case of the character string, suppose that I have my variable like this. Okay? Then I have some white spaces. When I say white space, I mean space, tab key, and new line character. So I have white space in the beginning and at the end. The end line is the last character is a new line character. Okay? So if I call strip function, it will eliminate white spaces in the beginning and it will also remove the new line character at the end. Okay? And then it will return this output, okay? So that this cleaned secret, that variable receives the new character string start with my secure password. So clean the secret, receive that information, okay? And this array function will count the number of letters in this my underscore secure underscore password. Oh, there is 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so it will count the number of letters inside of this my secure password 1, 2, 3, and it eliminated the spaces in the beginning and new line character. So 3 spaces and 1 new line character were removed. So the original expression consists of 25 letters, including the spaces, but after the elimination, you have only 21 letters. Okay. So as I said, okay, these three function eliminates only spaces, okay, white spaces in the beginning and at the end. And this function will return a new character string. Okay, the original string is not altered. So that will cause some mistakes. So here are some examples. So suppose that I have this character string. Okay? This character string. If I call string function, this will generate Professor underscore Kim. Okay? It will create this moment for a moment, okay? And then, when this line generates this Professor underscore Kim, there is no assignment. So, this Professor underscore Kim will be created for a second, and then when the Python interpreter goes to the next line, that information will be erased from the memory. That means you lose that information. Okay? The original variable, the original username is still Professor Kim with some spaces in the beginning and at the end. So in number 3, okay, if you print this line with original username, you get this as an output with some spaces. Those spaces of the original variable are not erased. Okay? You created this output for a second, but once you go to the next line, that information will be erased. Okay? So if you want to use that information, you need to assign that information to a new variable. Like this. So if I create a variable, we have assignment symbol equals a sign, and then if I call strip function, that strip function will remove the spaces in the beginning and at the end, and that result will be saved under the name of cleaned username. So if you print cleaned username that does not have any space in the beginning or at the end, and the original value, original username still has spaces. Okay, that's one of the common mistakes. And I think I thought I put down some, something like this. So let me explain this one. Now, as I said, this strip function will eliminate only spaces in the beginning, okay, white spaces in the beginning and at the end. So if some variable has spaces like this, okay, and if I just print user input, then it has some spaces. Now, if I call strip function, it will eliminate spaces in the beginning and at the end. But we still have a space in the middle. And that space in the middle is not erased, okay, by this strip function. So strip function does not remove any spaces, okay, in the middle of the expression. It will remove the spaces, white spaces, okay, the space, tab, and uline character in the beginning and at the end only. Okay, and then once I remove that spaces in the beginning and at the end, if I call title function, then that will change this A and I into uppercases. Okay? Please try this example, this title function with the original variable. Okay, please check it yourself, and then please check what happens. And then these multiple functions can be used all together. Okay? Then this is kind of a composition of multiple functions. Then similarly to the mathematical composition, the innermost function will be evaluated first, and then the next outer function, and then the outer function, right? And then the outermost function will be evaluated at the end. So given this expression, the function closer to the character string will be evaluated first, and then the next one. So given these two functions, strip and upper, strip will be evaluated first, which will eliminate these two spaces. And then if I call upper, then this upper function will be applied to SEOUL, that 5 letters. Okay, so we have this expression in uppercases. So some people want to combine those functions all together so that they can write down all the expressions in a single line. Okay, it is a little bit difficult to understand, but the code becomes shorter. So some people prefer this one, but since it is a little bit more difficult to understand, some people split the expression into multiple lines. So it's up to you. Okay. And then we considered character strings and some group of items, okay? Because these strings and a group of numbers defined by the range function, I said they are some sequence with orders. If they have orders, they probably have some index numbers, some ID numbers, and Python automatically assigns a unique ID number starting from 0. And that ID number is called an index in Python. So in other words, each item in a sequence, the ordered sequence has an index value that starts from 0, not 1. In some programming languages like MATLAB, the index value starts from 1, but in many classical programming languages like C, C++, or Python, the index value starts from 0. So if the sequence contains 5 items, then the first item has an index value 0, then second item has index value 1, third item has the index 2, so the fifth item has index value 4. So if there are n items in this sequence, then the last item has an index value of the length minus 1. If you want to access certain item and then if you specify an index value beyond that number, then Python will give you an error message. In other words, if you have a sequence of 5 items, and if you want to access the item with index 5, then you get an error message because the index number varies from 0 up to 4 in that case. So if you want to access index 5, then you got an error. this error message. So if I have a character string of Python, okay, then this character string may be interpreted as a sequence of letters. Okay, so the first letter P has an index value 0, and Y has index 1, and T has index value 2, and the last word, last character N has index 5. And random access means, given this sequence, you may, if you want, okay, you can access certain item corresponding to a specific index value. Okay, when we consider the for loop, when we have for the character in, say, hi, CHL takes one of these 3 letters in that character string, okay, from the first to the third one, right? So that's what happens in for loop. But if we want, we can just directly access the second item or the third item, okay, using this index value. So that's what the random access implies. So unlike sequential access, which we encountered in this for loop, so that means that in the for loop, the character will access from the first item to the last item. Random access allows us to jump directly to any position inside the sequence. Okay, and if you want to specify the element corresponding to specific index value, we use the square bracket. And inside the square bracket, you specify the index value you want to consider. So here is the simple way to use. So here is the name of the sequence, and then inside the square bracket, you provide the index number. Then you can access the specific character or specific number inside a sequence of numbers. And this will be you will frequently use that expression from now on. So suppose that university consists of these 5 letters from K to A. Then when I say university, the square bracket of 0, then I'm implying the first item in the sequence, which is K. If I call university with the index value 2, then I imply the third item, not second item. So given this first letter and the third letter, if I print them, you get K and R. If I call len university, then as we observed previously, len function will count the number of letters in the university variable, which is 5. So len of university will consider 5. And if I subtract 1, last index will be 4. So if I call university with that index value, you are specifying the last letter of this sequence. So A will be printed in that case. If I have word which consists of these 2 letters, but if I want to access word corresponding to the index number 2, okay? Index number 2 represents the third item in a sequence, but this sequence consists of only 2 items. So if you want to access that item, then you get an error message. And this is a very common mistake. Okay. Especially when you get some experience with some other language like MATLAB. which is quite common in engineering schools. But so please be careful in Python. Okay, in Python, the index value starts from 0, not 1. Now, the many programming languages like C, MATLAB, they allow only non-negative index values. In Python, the negative index is also allowed. Okay? So Python provides to access the some way to access items starting from the last item in the sequence to the first one. So from the end of the sequence, okay, to the first one. So the last item in the sequence has an index value of -1. Okay, so for example, if I have the previous message, the variable, say if the variable is defined by, say, Korea, the letter K has index of 0, and O has an index 1, and R has an index 2, 3, 4 will be the index values for those 5 letters. This negative index assigns -1 to the end of the sequence. So A has 2 possible index values, 4 and -1. And then in case of the index value, you assign -1 to the last item, and then you decrease by 1 from the last to the first item. Meaning E has -2 as its negative index, and -3 for R, then -4 and -5. Okay, so if I consider VAR of -1, that will represent the letter A. And in case of VAR of -5, that represents the letter K. Python, okay, knows a little bit about these numbers. So if you call VAR with -0, mathematically -0 equals just 0. So if you use that expression, that is fine, okay, with Python syntax. And since -0 equals 0, VAR of -0 will give you the letter K. Okay, so that's why in case of negative indexing, the index number starts with -1. Even though -0 is allowed, okay, this -0 will be the same as just 0. So that's how this negative indexing works. So as I said, if I have this Python, okay, this P has 2 index values, index 0 and -6. Y has 2 indices, +1 or -5. The last letter N has 2 index values, 5 and -1. So there are 2 ways for indexing. Well, if you are really new to this programming word, then probably you will use this positive indexing. Okay? That might be easier. Now, by any chance, if you download certain code from the web, or if your colleagues are a little bit advanced programmers, okay, they may write some code with negative indexing. In that case, at least you should be able to understand the meaning of the code which you received or downloaded, right? So even though using this negative indexing may be a little bit difficult, okay, at least you need to know the meaning of those expressions. That's why I'm explaining both positive and negative indexing. So please practice, play with this negative indexing as well. It is fun, I think. So, given this phrase, data science, okay, if I consider this expression, length of a phrase, what is the value that the length of phrase returns? Data consists of 4 letters, science consists of 7 letters, and there is a space. Okay, so length of a phrase will return 12, right? So that means this E at the end will have the positive index of 11. So if you use the positive indexing, then, and if you want to access this E, then you need to use 11 as an indexed value. So if you put 11 inside the square bracket, then you can access that letter. Or you can just call this phrase with -1 as the index value. Then -1 will represent the last letter. So you don't have to call this length if you use the negative indexing. Okay. And if you want to access the second to the last element, then you can just use -2 as an index value. Okay. So -2 will access the letter C, which is the second to the last element of the string. Okay. So, please, as I said, you do not consider -0. So if you use a phrase with -0 index, then that will give you the first letter D. Okay? Because that equals phrase with 0. Okay, both -0 and 0 will represent the first letter of this indexing. Okay, questions? Okay, then let's call it a day here, okay, and then let me continue tomorrow. And please do not forget about your second assignment, which is due Wednesday, not Friday. Okay, there was a typo, but the due date is coming Wednesday, 11 p.m. Please be careful. You please download that .py file. As I said, there were 2 students, okay, who didn't send the Python file. So please be careful this time. Okay? Any questions? Okay, then see you tomorrow. Yes? I'm sorry? This is small c? The lowercase c? What is the question? Oh, what is wrong with this one? Can you tell? Okay, anyway, let's put it a day here and then let me continue tomorrow. Okay, then let me start today's class. So yesterday we considered some strings and we considered something called a random access to specify certain element of a string corresponding to a certain index value. Okay, so may I talk? Okay, so if you want to talk, please raise your hand so that we can share some ideas together, but otherwise, okay, let me have a chance to talk. Okay, so given some string, character string, like this. So suppose that I have a string like data science, okay? And if I want to access a certain specific letter inside the string, then I can use on index value. That index is the ID number for each letter in this list, in this character string. So the index starts from the left-hand side and with the value 0. So the leftmost, the letter D has the index value 0, and then the index value is increased by 1. So if I want to access, say, this A in the second item, second letter, then the corresponding index will be 1. Okay? And then this T has the index value of 2 and so on. Or you can use the negative index. Then the negative index counts from the right-hand side, from the rightmost entry to the leftmost entry. So the rightmost entry, this E, has the negative index of -1. Then the next value, C, has the negative index of -2, and so on. So using this index value, I can specify certain letter inside the string. Okay? Today, we will consider something called slicing. So here, slicing means I want to access multiple items at the same time. So the slicing allows us to extract the multiple items. Okay? And this slicing can be used not only for these character strings, but also for some other types of sequences. For example, today we will study something called a list today, and that list also allows certain slicing or random accessing. So if I want to access multiple items, then I need to specify the index for the starting value, and the index, I need to also specify the index for the stop value. In other words, I need to define the range of index values by specifying two numbers, start and stop. Both are some integers, okay, corresponding to, and they will be the indices of certain letters inside the character string. Okay, and of course, so if I consider this expression, then I imply the characters whose index value corresponds to, belongs to the range between start and stop. And this is the element corresponding to stop is not included. It is exclusive. The end value is always exclusive in this Python notation. So, as an example, if I consider the Python's character string, as we know, P has an index 0, Y has index 1, and T has index 2, and so on. So if I want to access, say, first the two letters, P and Y, then since the index value corresponding to P is 0, and the index value corresponding to Y is 1, I need to use the slicing with 0 and 2, because the letter corresponding to 2 is excluded. So the range defined by 0:2 will represent only two index values, 0 and 1, by this notation. So if I call what with square bracket of 0:2, then that will that will represent first the two letters. So P and Y are represented by that notation. So here is some example. Suppose that I have a phrase of artificial intelligence, and if I consider phrase with a square bracket of 0:3, then this is 0:3 represents the index values of 0, 1, 2, and actually up to 3, but this 3 is not included. So only these three numbers are represented by that 0:3. So the letters corresponding to these index values will be ART. So only ART will be printed by that expression. And if I consider phrase of 11:23, then probably, if I didn't make a mistake, the index value for this uppercase I will be 11, and the index value corresponding to this last E will be 22. Oops, 22. So if I use the expression 11:23, then I'm implying 11, 12, up to 22, not including 23. Okay. So in that case, all the letters in the intelligence are represented by that expression. So word 2 will have this word intelligence. Okay. And len can be used with many different types of variables in Python. So if you want to consider certain character strings whose length can be changed, then the previous expression, if you specify specific number like 11 up to 23, the kind of expression is not that universal, because if I consider different character strings, then those numbers must be changed, right? So if we want to consider some dynamic change, okay, within the code, then probably you can use this length function. If you combine length function somehow, then probably we don't have to hard code those specific numbers in the code, because those, hard coding those numbers in a code is one possible cause of an error or bug. I mean, given this code, data 1 and data 2 are considered. Data 1 consists of only 6 letters. Data 2 consists of 15 letters. So if I want to consider, say, last 3 letters in data 1 and data 2, what you can do is I can use length function. So len of data 1 will return the value 6. So if I subtract 3 from that length, then this expression will be replaced by 3. So in that case, I'm accessing the last 3 letters in data 1. So instead of hard coding these numbers, so instead of 3 to 6, expression using the length function is safer, because I can reuse that expression here with data 2 as well. Given this data 2, whose length is 15, okay, if I wanted to access the last 3 letters, and if I had to hard code those numbers, then I need to consider data 2 of, say, 12 to 16, 12 to 15, sorry. Then it will consider the last 3 letters. But if I use length function, this length of data 2 will automatically generate 15. And if I subtract 3 from the length of data 2, then that expression will imply 12. So instead of typing these specific numbers in a code, because if you type these numbers directly, then when you need to change the values of the data, then you need to find all the occurrences of such hard coding and you need to correct them, right? And if you miss any part in the code, then that will cause a bug. So personally, I do not type any specific numbers in the code. If needed, I need to define those numbers with appropriate names at the top of the code. And in the main body, I do not introduce any numbers. That's what I do personally. And actually, many people do that. So if you download some code, usually people define many variables which are used in the code. And then in the main body of the code, they do not type some numbers like this. Okay? Even these three will be defined under a certain name, and then instead of 3, that name of the variable will be used. Okay, that's what people usually do, because it is safer in that case. Now, when I consider this expression, start, colon, stop, okay, you can omit one of these two. Okay, so actually, if you want, you can omit both of them. So if I omit the starting value, and if you see just expression like this, colon, stop value, like data 1 with colon and say 3, then that implicitly assume that the starting value is 0. So this expression means I want to consider 3 letters from the beginning. So that will show the first 3 letters in data 1 variable. If you omit the stop value, then length of that variable will replace that stop value. So if I see data 1, say 3 colon and square bracket, then the stop value is omitted. And if the stop value is omitted, then that is interpreted by data 1 with 3 colon, the length of data 1. Okay? So that means I want to consider all the letters, okay, starting from the index 3 to the end. If you want, you can omit both of them. So if you see data 1 with just the colon, that means since the start value is omitted, that means I want to consider from the beginning. And the stop value is also omitted, so that means I want to go all the way to the end. So that will be the same as accessing all the letters in this data 1 string. Okay. So, given this course title, say Applied Mathematics, if I see this expression, course title, square bracket, and colon 7, then that means from the first letter, I want to access 7 letters from the beginning. This one means since the stop value is omitted, I want to access the letter corresponding to the index value 7 to the end. Now, I said the letter corresponding to the index value 7. In other words, I'm considering the 8th item, 8th letter. So APPLIE, so 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So index 7 corresponds to this uppercase M. So this expression, so course title 7 colon, that will represent the letter corresponding to this uppercase M to the end. So mathematics will be given to the second word. If I omit both start value and stop value, then that means I'm considering from the first letter to the end. So full copy will take applied mathematics. Okay? So these whole letters are given to the full copy variable. Questions? Now, sometimes I can control, okay, this group of numbers using a step size. So I can define a group of numbers with some increment. So this step size will be an increment starting from the start value. So you generate a sequence of numbers starting from start with the increment of step value, okay, up to this stop value. But stop value is not included. Step size may be positive or negative. Okay. And positive step size can be meaningful only when the stop value is greater than start value. You can consider negative step size only when stop value is less than start value. Otherwise, an empty set will be created by that expression, and those letters in the string can be accessed. And as I said, the start value can be omitted. If the start value is omitted, that means from the beginning. And if the stop value is omitted, that means you go all the way to the end. Okay? So, if I see this expression, which might appear quite often in many examples in advanced programs. So here, there are two columns. And as you can see, the start value and stop value is omitted. So that means we want to consider from the beginning of the string to the end, but the step size is -1. That means I want to go from the last symbol, okay, last letter, to the first one, okay, and I want to go backward. That's what this notation implies. So here is some example. So suppose that I have this numeric string from 0 to 9. If I see this notation, then there are two columns. So this number 2 will be the step size. The start and stop value are omitted. So I want to go from the beginning, the 0. Since the step size is 2, I want to go from number 0, okay, to the end, 9, with the increment of 2. So evens will contain 0, then you skip 1, and then you get 2, you skip 3 and take 4, then 6 and 8. If you consider this, only stop value is omitted and start value is 1. So 1 is the index corresponding to the value 1. And then if I add 2, you get index 3. Index 3 corresponds to an integer 3. If I add 2, you get 5, then 7, then 9. Okay? In example 3, start and stop value are both omitted. So I want to go from the beginning to the end, and the increment is -1. So that means I want to go backward. Okay, from the last number 9, then 8, 7, up to 1 and 0. Okay, so I want to go backward. So that's what you get from the printout. Okay, questions? Is that too simple? Okay, now given a text string, we can call a function named find. Find will scan a given sequence, okay, for some occurrence of specific character string. Okay, and then if the find function finds that given substring, then this one will return the index value of that character string. Okay? If the character string consists of multiple letters, then the index value of the first letter will be returned. Okay? Now, if find cannot find the given character string, find will return -1. Okay? So please be careful with this error message, the returning value. When the given string is found, then the index value of the first letter in this substring will be returned. If the string is not found, then -1 will be returned. And by default, the find function will search for the occurrence of that expression from the beginning, from the rightmost entry of the sequence. If you want to search from a specific point, then you can provide that location as the second parameter. So if the second number is provided, then that means, okay, I want to search from that point to the right. Okay? So here is some example. Suppose that I have this sentence with artificial intelligence and deep learning. And if I try to find intelligence, then it will search from the letter A to see if this sentence has intelligence. If this intelligence is found, then the index value corresponding to this uppercase I will be returned. So you get 11. Okay? That 11 will be returned by that find function. If you try to find, say, Python from that sentence, the sentence does not have Python in it. So in that case, -1 will be returned. And of course, in Python, case matters. So intelligence with lowercase I cannot be found from this sentence. So if you try to find this lowercase intelligence, then -1 will be returned as well. If you provide second parameter, say if you say search intelligence and say 20, then you cannot find intelligence when you consider, say, 20th letter and beyond. And in that case, the find function will return -1. Okay? So find function will search for certain expression from the strings. Now, if I call this sentence and find of, say, just the letter I, then as you can see, there are many I's in this sentence. We have I, and learning I. So there are five I's, five lowercase i's, okay, in this sentence. When you call this to find the function with this I, the index value of the first occurrence of I will be returned. And then it does not consider the remaining portion. Okay? So once this I is found, then this find function will return the value 3. And this 3 will be printed on the screen, and then it does not search anymore. Okay? So that's what this find does. Okay? So in case of find, I need to provide the expression I want to find. Okay, that's the argument of the function. Okay. So given this the email input, okay, so email input consists of some letters, and you try to find something, some specific letter within this expression. If the symbol or letter is found, then find function will return the index value. What does this imply? That means what the find function returns is different from -1. And -1 is returned only when find cannot, when this find function fails to find that symbol, right? So this expression, this condition checks whether this symbol is included in this character string. Okay? So on Thursday, okay, we have the exam, right? So if I provide this code, okay, then you can easily guess the appropriate outcome of the code, right? So that will be one common type of the problems. I will provide some code like this, and you need to check, you need to provide a certain output from the code. Okay. The midterm will cover first 10 notes. So this is the 9th note, and 10th note was uploaded about half an hour ago. So the midterm will cover those 10 notes, okay? And then there will be 8 more notes. I'm not sure whether we can cover all these 8 notes because they have many slides. So I'm just checking, okay? Anyway, the midterm will cover first 10 notes, okay? Note 1 up to note 10. The review note is not counted, okay? There is another function called index function. In case of an index function, okay, this is very similar to the find function. When you call the index function, you provide certain sequence, character string, similarly to the find function. And then when that sequence is found, the index function will also return the index value of that occurrence. Okay? So when that subsequence exists, okay, when the expression exists in the given sentence, okay, then the behavior of index and the find functions are identical. The difference, okay, is obtained when the expression is not found. As I said, when the given expression is not found, find function will return -1. But in case of index function, it will return an error message. So the behavior when the expression is not found is different. So when you have an error message, then the program stops. The program crashes. So here is some code. So given some character string, say lecture topic is physics-informed neural networks. This is one of the research topics in data science. Anyway, here I have index function with neural. Neural exists, okay, as a substring inside of this lecture topic. So when that is found, then my match position will take the index value corresponding to the first letter of this expression. So index value corresponding to this uppercase N will be returned. So match position will receive that value 17, and then that 17 is printed. So when this expression is found, there is no problem with this code. The problem happens when the expression is not found in the given character string. So if I try to find, say, diffusion from the character string, diffusion is not included in this lecture topic string. When that expression is not found, then before the assignment, this expression will return an error, which means the program stops. Okay? So the behavior is different. Previously, in case of a find function, when some expression is not found, then -1 was returned. So I could handle that situation using if sentence. Using the if the certain expression is found, I want to do something. If that expression is not found, I want to do something else. Okay? But in case of index function, when the expression is found, okay, that is fine. But if the expression is not found, then the program stops. Okay? So the index function, behavior of the index function is a little bit different. So here is the differences between these two. Okay? Between find and index. So if the given expression is found, then both the find function and index function will return the index corresponding to the first letter. Okay, so in that case, it is fine. The problem happens when, the difference happens when the given expression is not found. And in that case, find method will return -1. But in case of index function, that will return an error message. So in some sense, actually in terms of the programmer's viewpoint, the find function is safer than the index function, because if you use the index function, then there is a chance that your program crashes. Okay? So, but in other words, if I use this find function, then even when the given expression is not found, your program will continue to run. Okay? And that may not be what you wanted. Okay, depending on the situation. If something wrong happens, in some situation, you want your program to stop. Right? So depending on the situation, you need to choose one. Okay? And if we want to go, even when this expression is not found, you need to go with the find function. But if you want your function program stops when certain expression is not found, you need to go with index function. So when the given expression is not found, the behavior is different. But of course, when that expression is found, it both will return the index value corresponding to the first letter in the expression. So that's the difference. Those are differences between these two. So you can choose whatever you wanted. Okay? Questions?